Hello and welcome to SweetSpotDFS. This is a strategy video for the 2021 Players Championship. Now, if you're new to the channel, welcome. What I typically like to cover in these videos, I like to start with a course breakdown because I want to try to figure out if there's a benefit for hitting one shot shape versus another. At the Arnold Palmer Invitational last week, we determined that hitting a draw was a more beneficial shot shape. And of all the golfers inside the top 10, 11 out of 16 golfers hit draws. So there obviously was a correlation there. So we'll try to figure out if there's a benefit at this golf course to hitting one shot shape over the other. From there, I'm going to change it up just slightly. We're going to cover the sweet spot score, how it's created, and who ranks the best in my model. Because from there, we'll look at time pairings. And for those that are ranked well, that are paired together, we're going to be focusing on those guys and probably just targeting those in our lineups. I'm going to do a recap of a preview after that. Basically in the preview video, which happens the day before the strategy video, I like to cover course history, recent form. I like to talk about the bucket system, which also incorporates recent form and course history into that as well. And historical salaries as well as optimal lineups to try to figure out what makes up an optimal lineup. And that's what I'm trying to chase here at SweetSpotDFS. I'm always trying to find the optimal lineup. And it requires variety. It isn't hammering down on one stat or another. And this is what the bucket system helps doing. Why I do the recap is because I'm going to bring in strokes gained in bucket format. So that's the missing piece to the bucket system. And with all that together, we can really narrow down our player pool and use that towards the optimizer, which I will actually have at the end of the video. And I might do a little giveaway, so definitely be prepared to listen to see how or what I'm giving away and how to get it. So timestamps are in the description below. Also, chapter mode is enabled, so if you hover over the progress bar, you're going to see what the segments are. So let's go ahead and get into the spreadsheet. Of course, I have the course breakdown up right now. I'm not going to cover every single hole. I'm not going to go over every single one. What I'm going to advise you guys to do, pause the video and read what I have written if it interests you. I'll show you the front nine and there's the back nine. So basically the summary of this, it would assume or it would appear that hitting a draw is a bit more beneficial at this tournament than hitting a fade. But I have also heard that from past PGA Tour pros, or I can't remember if any of them are current, but either way, having good ball control. Yeah, I think it was like Trevor Immelman. I heard him talk about this. Having good ball control, being able to flight shots both directions are going to really benefit at this tournament. The only reason I say it might be a benefit to hit a draw is because on 2 par 5s, off the tee, hitting a draw will give you a considerably shorter second shot into the green, which obviously gives us the opportunity, or gives those golfers the opportunity for eagle, which is really good on DraftKings. And obviously I talk mostly about DraftKings. I don't ever bring FanDuel into the picture, but I'm sure the scoring is probably similar. But yeah, definitely hitting draws on those holes will benefit. And also the last hole, hitting a draw around the corner of the water is far more beneficial than hitting a fade. If you think about it, hitting a fade over that water, or actually hitting a fade would require you to start over the water. If it doesn't fade back, you have to re-tee. Hitting a draw that goes in the water somewhere, in front of you, hopefully within distance of you reaching the green in 2, is far more beneficial if you were to reach the water. So not only do the contours go for a draw, you can avoid, making a really large number if you hit a draw versus hitting a fade. So that's why I think the last hole definitely very important to hit a draw. And that's what I would lean to as my benefit at this golf course. So let's move on to the next piece, which is going to be the sweet spot score. Let me tell you how it's created first before looking at the golfers who are ranked the best. Basically, I'm looking at the stats you see right here. Official World Golf Ranking, overall bent grass average. This is from 2013 to current. Looking at top 10% on bent grass. This is the frequency of of these golfers finishing inside the top 10, and then using those same stats, but looking at Pete Dye golf courses, average finishing positions and frequency of top 10s. Then I'm looking at course history, bogey avoidance, birdie or better, recent form average, DK average, and scoring average. I'm trying to get all of these categories for the top guys close to 100. So you can see DJ, he's number 1 in the world. I have him ranked or rated as a 99.67. That's the formula I chose. It's the closest I could get to 100. So yeah, basically all these stats, I'm trying to get the best ranked guy to 100. And from there, we can look to see how these guys are ranked out based off of that score. I should actually mention the score is calculated over here. But our number 1 ranked golfer, you can already see it, is Rory McIlroy. This isn't a surprise to me. He has really good bent grass average. He has really good Pete Dye average. Same with the top 10 percentages and a really good course history here. So all in all, Rory number 1 rated in this model. Jon Rahm number 2. Patrick Cantlay, surprisingly enough, at 9,200 is ranked number 3. Some other things that kind of pop off here. Tommy Fleetwood, number 9, ranked in the model, $7,900. Followed by Abram Ancer, who's $7,500, ranked 11th. Sergio is up there, 15th. Louis Oosthuizen, who withdrew last week before the tournament started, is number 19 in the model. We don't know why he withdrew. I don't know if we do or if we don't. I don't personally know. But yeah, be cautious with that. Put it in your ownership model or however you want, however you select lineups. I wouldn't play him more than 12 to 15%. Just based off of injury risk alone. And then the next notable guy, Ryan Palmer at 7,300. This kind of rounds out the top 20, but I'm including Ryan Palmer because he's a cheap guy at ranked number 21. Now, if I go ahead and sort this by salary, you can see how some of these shake out. One surprising note is Victor Hovland and Colin Morikawa. Morikawa is ranked 30th. Hovland's 20th. A big reason for this is because they are, relatively new on tour. They don't have a lot of bent grass events under their belt, and they don't have a lot of Pete Dye events under their belt. So their results aren't as good as the guys ahead of them and below them. Plus, they don't have course history. Now, when a golfer does not have course history, I just give them a default score. It's usually like 35. Again, I'm trying to get the best guy close to 100. So, there's a little tweaking I could do with it, but it's not to punish guys who have no course history, but it's also not to give them, that much of a leg up. If we were to go through every single year and look at all of the debutantes who have not played, so the golfers who have not played this tournament prior to any single year, we're going to find usually one guy inside the top 10. And in order to get to the optimal lineup, you need at least 5 of your guys inside the top 10. So that's kind of, my reasoning why I wouldn't play more than 1 or 2 debutantes in a lineup at any given time. So you can see Eddie Pepperell in 2019 finished 3rd, his first time showing up. 2018, Xander Schauffele, he was the only debutant within the top 20. He finished 2nd, so not terrible at $7,300. In 2017, Alex Noren finished 10th, so he was right on that bubble of finishing inside the top 10. 2016, we don't see anybody who had 0 course history. 2015, we have Kevin Kisner and Ben Martin. I'm sure they probably played prior to, my sets only go back to 2013, so they probably played prior to 2013. Both of them had been on tour prior to that. 2014, Jordan Spieth. So this is the caliber of golfer we're kind of looking at. Now, without looking at all the debutantes, to kind of show you, whether or not you should target them or avoid them, it would take a little too long. I don't want to go through every single year and show you, the caliber of players that were first timers here. But just seeing the top 10, you can see that really no more than one golfer who has 0 course history at this golf course finishes inside the top 10. So for me, seeing these ranks for Collin Morikawa at 30 and Viktor Hovland at 20, that's okay with me. Because that's kind of what, we're assuming is going to happen. We're not going to see a lot of debutantes inside the top 10. Maybe this year is different because we have more and there's a higher caliber of those golfers. So keep that in mind too. I don't really have anything else to provide when it comes to sweet spot scores, so we might as well just get right into the tee time pairings. Basically, how we're going to be talking about tee time pairings, I am only going to select certain groups of golfers that have each golfer highlighted with a color. Now, the colors in this column under game either mean they are better than field average when it comes to DraftKings points or better than field average when it comes to scoring average. Light green would be DraftKings points, yellow would be scoring average, and this darker shade of green would be both. That means they are better than field average in both. So again, I'm only going to be talking about golfers or groups of golfers that have all three. I also failed to mention in the intro that after this, we're going to be talking about statement games and the matchups that I prefer on statement games. That's a fun way to play fantasy sports. So we'll be doing that right after this. The first group we're going to talk about, Scotty Scheffler, Russell Henley, and Tom Hoge. I really like Russell Henley this week. I was kind of toying with the idea of playing Scotty Scheffler. He is technically a debutant, although he did play one round last year. That also applies to Hovland, Neiman, and Morikawa. They all played one round last year, but they didn't play a full tournament. Either way, I like Russell Henley. Seeing Scotty Scheffler in this group also makes me like this group. It makes me like Russell Henley more. It makes me like Scotty Scheffler more. And now I'm kind of toying with the idea of playing Tom Hoge as well. If I'm going to, have a Scotty Scheffler and a Russell Henley lineup separately, I should say, not together, I'm probably going to play Tom Hoge in one or two of those. I don't really want to allocate 4 of my lineups or 5 of my lineups in some kind of combination between these 3, but I don't mind it. So if you're toying with the idea of playing one or the other, it's a good opportunity to do so. Scrolling down a little bit, unfortunate, Tony Finau is in a group that doesn't look to be doing that great as of late. But I do like Tony Finau. We'll talk about him a little bit later. Our next group we're going to talk about, Justin Thomas, Viktor Hovland, and Patrick Cantlay. Cantlay is the only one that doesn't have fade in this group. But like I said, I think there's a slight benefit to hitting a draw. He just doesn't get to see the rest of his playing partners hitting the same type of shot shape that he does. But Justin Thomas and Viktor Hovland get to draft off each other because they both hit fades. So they're going to see the same type of shot shapes as long as they're hitting good shots. I feel like they're just going to draft off each other pretty well. So if you did like, either of those two guys, pair them up together. Also, don't be afraid to play Patrick Cantlay as well. Patrick Cantlay, I think, is a great play for sure. Our next group, the best group, I think, in the field, paired up together. Rory McIlroy, Webb Simpson, Sergio Garcia. Not only they're better than field average in both of those stats that I mentioned earlier, they're rated really well in the sweet spot model. Rory and Webb, you know what? Sergio Garcia hits, he hits shot shapes both directions. And he also has 100% cut made percentage here. So playing him, I think, does you no wrong. And if you're going to pair him up with Rory and Webb. Rory and or Webb. Actually, I don't like playing all 3 together. I don't ever like playing 3 guys together in a group. But pair them up together. Rory and Sergio, Rory and Webb, Webb and Sergio. I think those are great ways to start lineups. And Sergio at 7,500 is a great... I actually think Sergio will play up to the level of these guys. And it gives me more confidence in playing Rory McIlroy, which a lot of people are kind of talking off of because of some comments he had made about not having a spark, that kind of stuff. What a wonderful group to play with. It's going to be highly competitive, and I think they're going to draft off each other pretty decently. Next group, Hideki Matsuyama, Harris English, Siwoo Kim. I don't care for this group, if I'm going to be completely honest. They do obviously rank, They're better than field average in both of those stats, minus Siwoo Kim. I don't know. I think you can do better, but if you do like any of these guys, why not pair them up? Just for that thought they could draft off each other. And if anything, showdown slates are a good way to go. The next group after that, Matthew Fitzpatrick, Carlos Ortiz, Kevin Na. Ortiz and Fitzpatrick are going to be seeing the same types of shot shapes. Kevin Na, not so much. But if there's one thing I'd say about this group, I actually trust Kevin Na more so than I do Fitzpatrick or Ortiz. I'm not saying I'm not going to play Ortiz. I'm not saying I'm not going to play or Fitzpatrick. I'm not going to play Ortiz. I'm going to play these guys. Probably just going to be low ownership, but still, the fact that they are all paired up together, I think it's going to be fine. I have really no take. I know I just mentioned that, but feeling-wise, I have no feeling one way or another owning these guys. Next group is kind of an interesting one. We have Xander Schauffele, Tyrrell Hatton, and Paul Casey. Xander can shape shots both directions. I know I have it as a draw. He primarily hits a draw. So him and Paul Casey are probably going to be seeing the same type of... actually, they hit very straight-looking shots. So I think they could play off each other pretty decently. I don't know how I feel about Tyrrell Hatton. I'm not going to avoid him, but I kind of don't like him this week. Maybe you guys disagree and say I need to. Chime off in the comment section. I'd love to hear it. But yeah, I think Xander and Paul Casey, great guys to anchor your lineups around. And we actually scroll down a little bit before we get to our next group, which is Jason Day, Matt Jones, and Rory Sabatini. I don't like this group. I don't trust Jason Day whatsoever. I don't like his golf swing. There's too much going on with Jason Day that I don't trust. So I'm just going to stay away from Jason Day. The one benefit I think he has is that Matt Jones is another Australian. So, I mean, they're going to have a wonderful time talking to each other, if they like each other, that is, on the golf course. Matt Jones, the only golfer in the group that has better than field average for DraftKings points and scoring average. So, obviously, he'd been playing decent golf. I want to say his last two starts are shaky. Unfortunately, I don't have a drill down option on Matt Jones to see that. But yeah, if you like these guys, I will also mention Rory Sabatini. When I ran my optimizer earlier today 100 times, he showed up once. That's more than a lot of golfers on that model can say. I'm talking a lot from 7K and the rest of the 6K. Like there weren't a lot of 6K golfers that showed up, but Rory Sabatini did. I don't know really what that means, but still showed up on the optimizer. Next group, Cameron Davis, Chris Kirk, Maverick McNeely. In the preview video, you would have heard me say I don't really care for Maverick McNeely. But seeing them all paired up together, they're all within that very juicy price range that we talked about in the preview video. That low 7K, high 6K range. Maybe we find somebody from the top 10 in this range. I don't think I'm going to pair any of these guys up. But if anything, it gives a reason to play at least one of them. I really do like Chris Kirk this week. I'm sure a lot of people do. He actually gets a price reduction from last week, and he did pretty well last week. I think he finished 10th. Pretty sure he finished 10th. Last week. He finished 8th. So yeah, not terrible. Next group after that, Scott Percy, Nate Lashley, Ryan Armour. They're all, they all have better scoring average than field average, but gross. How about this? You can use the same logic applied for this group to this group. That's all. That's all I'm going to talk about. I do not want to talk about that group whatsoever. Scrolling down, Justin Rose, Bubba Watson, Patton Kizzire is your next group. Justin Rose just withdrew last week. He withdrew after scoring a 9 on a golf hole, citing it was a back issue. I don't know how true that is, but I don't trust it. Bubba Watson is a black hole in golf groups. Now, him and Pat and Kazire are both good old Southeasterners. One's from Georgia, one's from Florida. Maybe that's something they can talk about, and Bubba Watson won't be a pain in his ass. But I usually like to avoid groups that have Bubba Watson in it. He was ranked as one of the worst golfers to golf with, I think. Top 5. I think number 1 is Rory Sabatini, believe it or not. Maybe if you know who that is, you know why it would be true. But it's just the fact that how fidgety Bubba is, the amount that he talks to himself, that he talks to other people, that can get really annoying on the golf course. But Justin Rose is a veteran with Bubba. Maybe they're good friends. I don't know. I am maybe just playing one of each, and that's it. I'm definitely not anchoring any of my lineups around them. Next group, Patrick Reed, Joaquin Niemann, and Aaron Wise. I liked the sounds of Patrick Reed and Joaquin Niemann until we talked about Aaron Wise, but I don't hate Patrick Reed and Joaquin Niemann. They both hit draws. They both hit rope hooks basically off the tee. So I think that's a decent group. Joaquin Niemann has really good value, 7,700. I mean, based off, from DraftKings points, he's over value. So yeah, if you like Joaquin Niemann, why not pair him up with Patrick Reed? I think it's a good pairing to do. Our next group, a really oddball group actually. Jon Rahm, Bryson DeChambeau, and Kevin Streelman. Now, Kevin Streelman, believe it or not, decent on the SweetSpot rank model. He's $6,800. If you needed a high 6K golfer, Streelman might be your man. And all three of them better than field average with DraftKings points and scoring average. So not a terrible group. The only thing I feel like, all three of them have different games. You could say Jon Rahm is a power hitter, and sure he is. He's a power guy. So he could, match up with Bryson, but they both hit different shot shapes. They both have wildly different golf swings. And then Kevin Streelman, who is probably your most cookie cutter golfer, mold of a golfer, he's there with these two, I don't want to call them oddball golfers because obviously they really aren't, but they just do things differently. And I only say that about Rahm because he doesn't do a full backswing. He has that really short swing, bowed wrist, hits a fade like DJ, lashes at it. It just, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about any of that. Maybe one plus is that Jon Rahm and Kevin Streelman both call Arizona their home state. If you can go off of anything. I don't know. This doesn't say one thing to me or another. I don't care for either of them. Our next group, Colin Morikawa, Daniel Berger, Jordan Spieth. Wow. Super interesting group. Obviously, Spieth has been playing some extremely good golf. I think we're at a point now, especially at 8,600, that if you're not rostering Jordan Spieth, you're probably losing out on an opportunity to win a tournament or just win money. So $8,600, I think, is actually a really good price for Jordan Spieth. If we were, earlier in the year at the, what's that first? The Safeway Open. When he was playing there, I think he was like $8,000. I'm like, this is too expensive for Jordan Spieth at the Safeway Open, which is obviously a lesser tournament than this. But obviously his recent play has given me more confidence to play him. 8,600 is actually underpriced. It's crazy how quickly that those things can change. So yeah, I like Jordan Spieth. Daniel Berger, Colin Morikawa, they're going to be seeing the same type of shot shape. So they might feed off each other. The whole group might feed off each other. Daniel Berger, his bane is Jordan Spieth, his kryptonite. If you recall that when they play together, Jordan Spieth usually gets the better of Daniel Berger. Even when Daniel Berger won the AT&T Pebble Beach, he was in a group with Spieth on Saturday and did not play nearly as great as he did Thursday, Friday, or Sunday. So there might be something there. This might be like a weird rivalry that we don't know about. But yeah, I think competitively, this group is a really good group to anchor around. And that covers Time Pairings, but we're not done with it because we're going to cover our statement games. And unfortunately, I don't have it ready to go. My apologies, Mark. Let me go ahead and throw it up. If you haven't visited Statement Games, please do so. It's a fun way to play fantasy sports. Basically, what you do is you select matchups or statements, I should say, over here on this screen here, and then you bring it over to your statements and you rank them based off of what you think is going to make you the most points. Obviously, you can see how mine are set up for this contest itself, but that's because these are easier points in my opinion to get. You can see the matchups just below, and we'll talk about those matchups right now. I do have it sorted by color for text color, so we will actually look at the first matchup that I have: Tony Finau versus Daniel Berger. I think it's a decent matchup. I am favoring Tony Finau over Daniel Berger, primarily because Tony Finau to me has been way more consistent. His scoring upside's much higher than Daniel Berger's. Now Tony Finau isn't in a group. He is not in a group that I care for. Daniel Berger's in a better group with more consistent scores. So it's a tight. It's much more tight than my sweet spot model gives it, although that looks pretty tight in itself. But yeah, Tony Finau gets the edge for me in that one. Going to our next one, I am selecting Rory McIlroy over Justin Thomas, and primarily because I just like the upside of Rory better than Justin Thomas. Now, I know some people might disagree with that profusely and saying, what upside? Rory's not been on his A game. I would almost argue he's not been on his B game. From his C game, he's getting top 10s. Justin Thomas is not. I don't know what off the tee, Justin Thomas is not doing the greatest. So for me, it's a tight one. Don't get me wrong. Justin Thomas can obviously go off. He can shoot some really low rounds, and I know he is the top birdie getter at this tournament. I think over the last 6 years. I can't remember what stat it was, but he's leading with the amount of birdies. But when the dust settles, I think Rory McIlroy will be looking down at Justin Thomas on the leaderboard. So for me, it's Rory McIlroy, and that's what Statement Games is. We're just looking at finishing positions. We're not looking at DraftKings points. And then the last matchup, I have Patrick Cantlay over Bryson DeChambeau. A lot closer. I mean, this is the closest matchup in my opinion. Sweet Spot model even agrees. Patrick Cantlay is number 3 on the list. Bryson just won a tournament last week. I really don't have anything to say other than that. I mean, Patrick Cantlay withdrew from his last tournament because of a stomach issue, I believe. But I think that actually benefits him because he usually is not a high load type of golfer, meaning he doesn't play a lot of events. He needs less events to do better. Because I'm not going to call him fragile, but he kind of is. He's kind of a brittle golfer. He has known back injuries. He's also had known, I can't think of what it's called in your nasal cavity, but he's had those injuries and a wrist injury, I think, not too long ago. So a little fragile golfer, having the time off, I think actually benefits him. I'm gonna pick him over Bryson DeChambeau. It is quite likely Bryson could, win this tournament, but there's more water at this golf course than at the API. And I don't think there are many places that he can miss where he won't get in trouble. Like there were places he could miss at the Bay Hill golf course. But yeah, I'm going to trust Cantlay's consistency. And Cantlay can go really low as well. So I like Cantlay as my last matchup for Statement Games. So again, visit Statement Games. Fun way to play. You get coins. Those coins can be redeemed for gift cards. So go check it out. A lot of fun. Okay, let's actually pull in the last piece of the bucket system puzzle, and that is the strokes gained buckets. Now, I do have their ranking over here with actually all of the bucket systems. So all of these columns here, actually, these are the columns that make up of the bucket system. These are just the averages and ranks based off of the average for their scores, for bucket system scores. But to talk about strokes gained, I'm going to go to a different page because this is an easier way to look at all this, how this is. Usually week in and week out, I tell you, look left to right, pick your golfers out of these buckets first. This would be your bucket 1. So every little header that you see, consider obviously this bucket 1, the next one, the next bucket. So bucket 2 would be this one, so on and so forth. I know I don't have it numbered. I just like to have the description for you guys to either remember or if you're new to know what it is. But basically, when we look at this at the end of a tournament, we usually see more golfers inside the top 20 left to right. And that kind of is an indication here how many I'm telling you to pick. So I know I don't have it saying pick 1 to 3, but basically you want to pick 1 to 3 golfers in this bucket. And this bucket is only 26 golfers deep. You can see I have it sorted by salary. So you can see who the top guys are on DraftKings versus some of these lower guys. Pick 1 to 3. Obviously, Rory's in that bucket. I like him a lot. So is Xander, so is Bryson, so is Webb. They're all in it. I could see, actually all 4 of those guys inside the top 10. I'm sure it's not going to happen, but if it does, you kind of have to fade one. And that's why I have pick 1 to 3. But I could easily say pick 3 or pick 4 because I think most of our top 10's coming from this bucket. The next bucket, positive off the tee, positive putting. This is bucket number 2. It's led by Scotty Scheffler at 8,900. Daniel Berger's right there at 88. And then you can see the rest of the guys as we scroll down. And you can see the sweet spot rank that I have them as well. Just to help you visualize if you like any of these guys and who to pick. Going on to strokes gained bucket number 3, Dustin Johnson leads this one. So your highest price guy on DraftKings is in here. Then your second highest, Jon Rahm, 10,900. You can see how they rank. Usually, again, 1 to 3 out of this group. So if you like any of these guys, and by the way, I know you guys can see Justin Thomas and Jordan Spieth in this next bucket. That would be bucket 4. It is quite possible that we could see all the high price guys in each of these buckets finishing inside the top 10, meaning you can't roster them. So although it says pick 1 to 3, maybe it's not Dustin Johnson you pick. Even if he does finish 4th or 5th, if JT finishes above him, and then say McIlroy and Xander finish above him as well, you can't play Dustin Johnson. And that might be your minimum of 1 to 3. He might be the only guy that finishes inside the top 10. It's unlikely, but he could be out of this bucket. It's just one of those things you have to think about. It's one of those things I've learned the hard way. I used to be very strict when it comes to, basically these rules. I would pick 1, no matter what, out of each of these buckets because that was my minimum. Only to find out some of the high price guys finish, inside the top 10, and you can't afford them with the rest of the guys inside the top 10. So some of them end up being 0 picks. But either way, you see what bucket 3 is. Bucket 4, Justin Thomas, Jordan Spieth, Adam Scott. I probably won't touch the rest of the guys down here. But if you were going to fade any of those guys, maybe pick up one of these guys here. 0 to 2 is my limit. Now, last week, there were actually 5 golfers that finished inside the top 10 out of this bucket. 5. And 3 or 4 of them were in the optimal lineup. Now, I did an alternate lineup because I think that optimal lineup was 48,000, so you were leaving 2,000 on the table. I created one that was 50,000. We only selected 1 out of this group. So a more realistic lineup, you wouldn't have had, that many strokes gained bucket 4. That's how I would read here. This is the 4th bucket. The 5th bucket has Tommy Fleetwood in it. So like, this is one of the oddest tournaments since I've started doing these strokes gained buckets I've ever seen, because there are a lot of high quality golfers throughout each of those buckets. Normally you see the high quality golfers in buckets 1, 2, or 3. That's it. We don't see them in 4 or 5. 4 and 5, I mean, like 4 you usually see Kevin Na, because 4 is negative off the tee, positive putting. So you see like a Kevin Na there, who's a known good putter. And more of those guys, like a Francesco Molinari, a Mark Leishman. Mark Leishman kind of gravitates between 4 and 5. That bucket, he's always negative off the tee, but he can find a hot putter here and there. Very well, we could see an equal amount of top 10 finishes out of all these buckets. But that's where kind of the max of 3 comes into play, which is totally fine. If you wanted to select one out of each of these buckets, no problems there. I would strongly advise out of bucket 6 not to select anyone here. And I don't think it's going to be difficult. Jerry Kelly, probably not playing him. Robert McIntyre, no reason for me to play him. And Ryan Moore, no reason to play him either. It's weird. Ryan Moore, I think, has been in 3 events this year, and he still isn't registering any strokes gained metrics from the PGA Tour. And those are the stats I grab. If you're wondering why these strokes gained buckets matter, let me pull up an instance. Now, I just have the Players' Championship up. If I were to look at all other tournaments, which I advise you guys to go do, just go look at previous strategy videos, because I do go over it there. What you're going to see is when we look at strokes gained off the tee, because that's obviously where I start. Strokes gained, these buckets, obviously bucket 1 is everything is positive. So that's everything positive. We don't even think about whatever. All the stats are positive. But then going further right, it all is off the tee and putting. That's all I look at. So positive, 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 negative, negative, positive, negative, negative. Looking at 2019, when we look at everybody inside the top 10, so if I go and clear all these out and only select golfers inside the top 10, we're stuck here. And when we look at everyone here with off the tee stats, only one golfer, Brandt Snedeker, has negative off the tee. Everyone else positive off the tee. And then I look at the putting stats to go with that. So when I look at all the putting stats, now Snedeker is a negative off the tee, positive putter, meaning he's a strokes gained bucket 4 golfer. Obviously, we just went over that, so hopefully you were paying attention. Now, when we look at this putting, so everybody else is positive off the tee, so we don't have to look at any other combinations, but I need to look at the putting combinations. Let's look at the negative putters. These are your strokes gained bucket 3 golfers. So you can see we have several. We have 4 golfers that have negative putting, positive off the tee. So that's one way. This is why variety matters, why we're looking at these golfers from bucket standpoints. So obviously 4 golfers that would fall under the strokes gained bucket 3. And you can see their price tags, 68, 83, 88, 61. So we have 2 6K golfers. Maybe that's how we pair up. How we find those 6K golfers in our lineups is trying to find strokes gained bucket 3 golfers that are in the 6K range. But outside of that, let's look at just positive off the tee, positive putting with nothing, with at least one negative stat in between. Jason Day would be the only strokes gained 2 that there would be. Otherwise, Justin Rose was a strokes gained 1. Everything was positive in those stats, as was Dustin Johnson, as was Jim Furyk, as was Rory McIlroy. So they were all strokes gained bucket 1 golfers. So obviously, you can see there's 4 strokes gained bucket 1 golfers. There was 1 strokes gained bucket 2 golfer. There were 3 strokes gained bucket 3 golfers? If I remember correctly, 1, 2, no, there are 4 strokes gained bucket 3 golfers. And you can see tee to green, I'm not looking at those stats. Those could be whatever they are. It doesn't matter to me. I'm just looking off the tee and putting. To me, those are the 2 stats that provide confidence when it comes to playing in a tournament. Prior to, are you good off the tee? Are you playing below average when it comes off the tee? Are you playing above average? That kind of thing. I want to know those things. So to me, that's how we figure out strokes gained. It isn't just saying, hey, we want ball strikers at this golf course. Let's just look at off the tee and approach, although this kind of looks pretty good. It's finding a good mix of golfers. Because if I were to open this back up, select everybody, and just sort from the best off the tee guys down. Here, let's delete this. The best off the tee guys down, you're going to see a wide mix of results here. So it's not saying, oh, only off the tee works. Well, the same thing applies to approach. I mean, if you were to go by approach, if someone's telling you this is an approach golf course, it's a second shot golf course, we need to be looking at approach, there are far more missed cuts at the top of that leaderboard for strokes gained approach than there are top 20s. So that's why we want to look at a variety mix, and that's what the bucket system helps do. I forgot to actually do the recap of the preview, but we can do that right now. We're joining this with the rest of the buckets. Let me go ahead and pull that up. Just a little refresher, a little recap. Your number one, okay, so we don't have last year. Usually we have a last year bucket, a last week bucket. There was no tournament last year. I mean, it was cut after the first round. So technically they did play, but there were no results. So that means no tournament. So we're not looking at last year anything. But when it comes to last week, the number one ranked bucket are golfers who did not play the week before. Your number two bucket, golfers who finished top 20. And then number three would be golfers who missed the cut. So weird, triangle of finishes, but those would be your top three buckets for last week. So we'll definitely be looking at that kind of thing. I have added course history buckets and recent form buckets, primarily because I started all of this looking at this kind of stuff. I didn't put it in bucket format, but I definitely looked at ranges and selected golfers based off of that. Your number one range for course history is between 40 and 60th place, or average finishing position. So when you're looking at course history averages, find a golfer in that 40 to 60 range. Now, the reason why it's the number one ranked bucket is because it usually is the highest volume. There are more golfers in this bucket than there are any other of the buckets. But still, it makes up 35% of the top 10, meaning you're still going to have to find golfers out of this bucket. Your number two course history bucket, that 20 to 40 range. Your number three bucket, 60 to 80 range. I should actually mark it over here. They comprise of nearly, 72% of top 10s at this tournament. And usually it's because, the volume inside those buckets much greater than the other ones. I think if we look at course history, we see an average of 6.33 at any given tournament. We see 4 this week at this tournament, which is pretty low. 12 is the most, but I guess outside of that, we see probably an average around 5. And that's primarily, that's a reason why we don't see that many, show up. And that's why the course history bucket is actually 6. It's not to say that you can't find, but the last time we saw a top 10 with the course history bucket 1 to 20 would be your highest volume of golfers in 2016 and 2015 for that bucket. So I should have mentioned that in the preview, but I'm glad I did here. Let's move on to the recent form bucket. Your number one ranked bucket, golfers coming in to form with that 20 to 40th average finishing position over the last 7 weeks. Number two is 40 to 60. Number three, 60 to 80. And fourth is actually 1 to 20. So your best, recent form golfers actually fall into the 4th ranked bucket for recent form. Not to say it's a bad bucket to choose from. Outside of 2017, your minimum would have been 2. You would want 2 golfers in your lineup that had that recent form bucket of 1 to 20. And again, these numbers are as high as they are because of how many golfers are in those buckets. A quick way to check is looking at this percentage here. This is just looking at, it should just say bucket percentage really, because it's comparing how many, this total against, so the total amount inside the top 10 versus the total amount altogether throughout all the years dating back to 2014 or 2015. So you can see the percentages here. This is giving you more confidence to play that bucket. So although this is the 4th ranked bucket, it's actually the number 1 ranked bucket when it compares itself against itself. That makes sense, right? So yeah, again, I mean, that's 13 into 75. It's a low bucket, but it turns out in the top 10, at a pretty decent rate. So don't discount it. To me, all I look at this is like, I want 1 of each, essentially, and maybe 2 out of bucket 1, or maybe 2 out of bucket 4, or 3. I mean, to me, it doesn't matter all that much how it's all sorted out, but I will, definitely take a look at my min and max exposures for those. And then we looked at salaries, and I won't take too long here. Basically, we found out most of our top 10 is dominated by 6K golfers, followed by 7K golfers. They make up 70% of the top 10. So finding your 7K range, I mean, we determined it was your low 7K golfers you want to really target, and your high 6K golfers. You can see kind of the favorite salaries and their ranges here in the top 10, top 5. And then you can also, see the summaries of, again, looking at the total number, how many finish inside the top 10 gives you that percentage. So this is basically saying you have a 5.6% chance of finding the correct 6K golfer to finish inside the top 10. And you can see the rest of the percentages also kind of bear out that. So yeah, that's kind of the recap of the preview. Usually you want to find a 10K and above guy, followed by a 9 and an 8, or maybe 2 8s, then 2 7s and a 6, or 3 7s. That usually makes up the optimal lineup. That's what we figured out in the preview. Thankfully, I don't have to go through every single one of these buckets and tell you, okay, of last week bucket 1s, we want to choose that. Of recent form bucket 2s, we want to choose these guys, so on and so forth. I actually have an optimizer that looks at those constraints. And for those of you that actually have this optimizer, I've been doing giveaways throughout the week. You had to watch the videos in order to see what you need in order to actually get this. I'm still going to give it away based off of you reaching out to me. I mean, on YouTube, you have to like and comment and then email me. Because unless you have your email linked to your YouTube, I can't contact you through YouTube other than through our comment section. So you have to like, comment, and then email me saying you're interested in this. If you're on Twitter, all you have to do is like my Twitter post, retweet it, and then I will message you. I will DM you and see if you're interested in using this. I've already given it out 3 times. Thank you for those guys that actually reached out. I appreciate the support. So if you do want the optimizer, please obviously follow those instructions I just told you. But going back to all the buckets, I can choose my min and max. And again, those that have this spreadsheet, you can do the same thing. You can set everything to 6, or you can set it to what it was. I have my SweetSpot defaults, which will automatically populate these things. It'll also automatically populate the maximum ownership that I have. I think I just changed it, so it should update with different numbers. There we go. But you can also set ownerships manually. So if you like DJ and you want to play him 40%, you can switch this however you like. You don't have to be struggled in the constraints that I have. But basically, again, I don't have to select, or I don't have to look at this DK page and try to determine who my favorite last week 1 golfer is, because the optimizer will just select the most optimal last week 1. Same goes with recent form, course history, and strokes gained. Now, I usually don't like to select any mins anymore, minimum exposure for these buckets, because I found out, kind of like I already mentioned, I might be correct. Inside the top 10, we might see 2 last year 1s. We might see 3 last year 2s. We might see only 1 last year 6. 1 last year 5 and 2 last year 4s or whatever, some kind of combination like that. If I'm like, you absolutely need 2 last year 1s, and I go and set that as my maximum exposure or my minimum exposure, I will select 2 last year 1s. But let's say inside the top 10, those 2 last year 1s are 10K. And then, but they finish 7th and 8th place. So yeah, they do finish inside the top 10. Hooray for me. But then our last year 6 finishes 2nd place. No, let's say he finishes 5th place, 4th or 5th place. Our last year 4, we have 2 last year 4s. One is 10K and above. And then one is in the 9K range. They finish 1st and 2nd, or 1st and 3rd. Now that minimum of last year 1 kind of loses its value because, or last week 1, whatever I said earlier, because of the other high price guys ahead of them kind of kicks them out of the optimal lineup, meaning they're not a part of the optimal lineup. So although I said you need 2, they're just no longer in the optimal lineup and they don't count. They do count for top 10 finishes. They just don't count for optimal lineup. Basically what I'm trying to get at is setting minimums might not be the most favorable thing to do, but setting maximums are, whether it's ownership or whether it's buckets. I will never do more than 1 last year 6. And I'm very on the fence of 2 last year 5s. I usually just only like to do 1 last year 5. And 1 last year 6, or last week 6, or I'm sorry, last week 5, 1 last week 5. Obviously, we don't have last year buckets. You can see the column that I have has X's for those. So I have already ran this optimizer 100 times. And actually, let me just pull up my Twitter because how this ended up happening shows it went by my presets for my ownership, which isn't how I want to do this. I don't want to show you this. I mean, I was running it while I was recording and realized this is not how I want it to look. But these are the ownerships. I tweeted this out earlier. 100 lineups I created. You can see I don't have any exposures set except for, or minimum exposures, except for down here at the strokes gained. And I set my maximum ownership to 40 for everybody. What this ends up doing is it really concentrates a core. So you can see Rory McIlroy, strokes gained bucket 1, course history 2, recent form 1, last week 2. Perfect. Patrick Cantlay, obviously you can see all the buckets. Now Tommy Fleetwood is a strokes gained bucket 5. He doesn't have a lot of events on the PGA Tour, but of the events he does, obviously negative off the tee, negative putting. To me, he's more of a positive off the tee guy, so I think that's going to regress back. I think it's okay playing him. Usually my rule is never to play more than 2, or never play a golfer who has 2 categories of buckets that are 5 or greater. So Fleetwood is very like on the I like Fleetwood, so I'm going to play Fleetwood. Abraham Ancer shows up there. He is at course history 6. Now that means I'm not going to play Abraham Ancer and Tommy Fleetwood together. Maybe I will in one lineup, but as my constraints allow me, they're only going to choose 1, course history 6. Actually, last week I think we actually saw a couple course history 6s. So let me move this to 2. But as we go down the list, you can see all the different combinations and what the optimizer like. Now the optimizer's looking at this metric column and it's trying to figure out what the best plays are when it comes to the optimal lineup, or optimal plays, I should say. But yeah, when you look at all the guys here with their bucket scores, you can kind of see nothing is really going to be a constraint against each other. We do see a couple 6s. So like Adam Scott, course history 6. Obviously, the optimizer isn't going to like him with Fleetwood and Ancer. We only have 1 strokes gained 5 in Tommy Fleetwood. We don't see any recent forms in the 5 or 6s. Last week bucket, we see a 5 with Kevin Kisner, Ian Poulter, Jason Day, and that's it. So really, this is a good core of golfers. And I guess if I was to, you know, trim down the fat per se and narrow down my player pool, this is actually a decent player pool in my opinion. I like Ryan Palmer, check, like that. Kevin Kisner, I like. Sergio Garcia was talking about earlier. Joaquin Niemann, I like those guys. Abraham Ancer, same thing. All of these guys get checks in my book. So definitely like those guys. The one thing I found out, I'm actually just going to put 22% for the rest of these guys because it's silly not to have them as 9%. I need to actually sort this from salary up in order to find the correct optimal lineup. And I'll show you why. So if I run the optimizer just as is, you're going to see Dustin Johnson, I believe. Oh, it changed. I think it's because I have 2 6s, right? Or 2 course history 5s. This is a different lineup than I've been seeing. Interesting. Why is that? I'm not sure. But for the makeup of it, I had said optimal lineup, you want a 10K and above, a 9 or an 8K. Basically, it was either a 10K above, 9, and then 3 7s and a 6K, or it was a 10, 2 8s, 2 7s, and a 6K. This obviously, salary-wise, actually proves out to be pretty darn good. But this has a 44.1 or 4,417 as the metric, the total combined points for those 6 golfers. What I was trying to get at, I was hoping, oh, does that matter what I just did right there? I don't know why that wasn't deleted. Oh, I see. I've witnessed something. I deleted a golfer before we went here, and the optimizer isn't updated with that score. So when I put the SweetSpot defaults, golfers got different numbers than what they're supposed to. Okay. This should be updated now. Let's run it again. I don't think we'll see the same guys. Actually, SweetSpot defaults. Yep. Let's make sure. I suppose that's still going to be printed down there, but that's fine. All right, run optimizer. I think we're going to find somebody different. I hope so. No. For some reason, I'm not convinced that this updated properly, but that's fine. We don't have to worry about it. This still shows us this way, but here, let me show you something. If I guarantee you it's got to be Mark Leishman. Mark Leishman was not in my group before. $7,500 Mark Leishman, 615. And we have him at 720. There we go. That is the issue. So what the heck? Did I actually the guy that was deleted, let's see if Mark Leishman's still 720. He's 615. Who is Brooks still in this lineup? All right, so the only way to actually do this is to actually copy and paste everything back over. Unbelievable. And then the score. And the salary. So I don't I don't know why it was doing what it was. Oh, it was probably a sorting issue. That's what it was, most likely. Okay. Let me run that optimizer again. The Danny Willett withdrawal was something that kind of put things out of whack. So I don't remember Will Zalatoris being in this lineup, but here we have it, Will Zalatoris. Okay, let me get to what I was trying to get at. What I found out in the optimizer is if I were to go ahead and sort this based off of salary and go smallest to largest, I know I didn't have it saved as the metric, but remember it was 4416. If I run this again, we should see a higher number. And the reason why it happens is, yeah, so 4420, so just barely more. The reason why this happens is because the optimizer, when it selects a golfer, it's looking top down. So when it says, ooh, this guy here, it goes through so many different iterations to find out what is the best combination of golfers to give me the highest total metric. It will select the first guy and then go down and look at the next one and so on and so forth. I mean, it goes through a bunch of different iterations, but for whatever reason, it selects top down. And if your top guy is the most expensive guy, so obviously we don't see John Rahm on here anymore, Webb Simpson ends up showing up. It's primarily because now it's selecting the first guy it selects is actually a lower price guy. So then it uses the salaries and go, okay, and the metrics and determines who the better play is. So for those that have the optimizer out there, I would recommend, I say this in my emails, first sort by the metric. So obviously select every cell. Don't miss out on any of them. Look at the metric, whatever yours is. Again, you want the highest number first. So we'll sort there. And then again, sort by salary and run the optimizer from there. And you don't have to scroll up to hit the run optimizer. Everything kind of just naturally moves it back up so you can see who was selected. So yeah, this is the new optimal lineup, and I think it's because Danny Willett was removed from my pool, and therefore it is no longer. It had Patrick Cantlay and Rory McIlroy in it before. And that was not me manipulating the data whatsoever, but I'm going to work on this to try to get it where you get to see it from largest to smallest, because honestly, that is the best way, to look at any optimizer is to see who your favorite guy is. Did I just go by metric? I did go by metric. I wonder if I have it by metric, if it will pick Rory. Nope. Rahm, Cantlay, Ancer, Sergio Garcia, Ryan Palmer, and Will Zalatoris. Zalatoris was picked 6 on there, and you can see how the order changed up because of how I changed it with the metric. But I like Will Zalatoris this week. If there was a debutante that I liked, it's him. And I do like Ryan Palmer. I like Sergio Garcia. I do like Abraham Ancer. And the weird thing to me is Rory's cheaper. This is what I don't get with the optimizer. Rory's cheaper, and he has a higher metric score. I don't get it. There must be is there an exposure that I have too much of? Maybe it's looking at last week versus, maybe that's what it is. Let me try something. If I put this as a 1, no, doesn't change anything. Interesting. So as you can see, the optimizer for whatever reason, is not selecting the absolute optimized lineup, which is very bothersome. There has to be something that's pulling. Anyways, let's not waste any more of your time. Yeah, to me, what you see in this tweet, this is basically the core. If I'm making a player pool, it's everyone who has 40% ownership. So in this column right here, it starts with Kisner, Palmer, Oosthuizen. I'm probably not going to play 40% Oosthuizen. Actually, I'm not going to play 40% of any of these guys. This is just how it shows up. But I do like all of them. I mean, I like Rom. I like Scott. I don't care too much for Kuchar. It is interesting to see Bryson at 13%. Finau, I'd probably want more of. I do like that. Jason Day can stay right there at 5%. I don't want any more than that. DJ and Xander, I'm going to bump up those ownerships. And you don't see JT on there. I believe he was 0%. But McIlroy, Cantlay, Simpson, Fleetwood, Ancer, those top guys right there, definitely my favorite and definitely would be in my core. So I know the optimizer. Actually, you know what? Let me just run a couple things, because I do want to go, select some of those pairings that we talked about. So I'm going to go by salary, largest to smallest. I think I actually have to do something like this. Yeah. Okay, so let me run that one more time to see what it looks like. I'm just curious. Has to change, right? Or is it going to be John Rahm, Patrick Hanley? Yeah, okay. So the same thing. Okay. So let's look at some of the pairings that we were looking at, just to see if we can come up with a decent combination of golfers. I think the first one that I remember, we'll go by this. I'm going to hide these columns. I'm going to talk about this next, just quickly. But let's say Scotty Scheffler, Russell Henley, Tom Hoge. So let's go ahead and find Scotty Scheffler, and let's do a Russell Henley lineup and see what that looks like. What would be the optimal lineup with those two golfers in it? Cantlay, Scheffler, Matsuyama, Fleetwood, Zalatoris, Henley. That is a solid lineup. I like that lineup a lot. Okay. Go to the next one. JT, Cantlay. Hovland was a part of this, but I'm not going to select Hovland. So that, if you were wondering, but Cantlay and JT. I'm sure we're going to see a lot of the same golfers, because that's just how the optimizer works. It's basically looking at the value of the price that golfer is with the metric to go along with it. But our best Cantlay JT lineup is going to have Tommy Fleetwood, Oosthuizen, Zalatoris, and Garcia. So it's going to be those same guys. Really, there's no reason to go throughout all of the other combinations, because it's going to include Fleetwood, Oosthuizen, Zalatoris, Garcia, Palmer, basically everybody that was ranked highly on the SweetSpot model that's cheap enough to play. So if it's not Ancer, it's going to be Garcia. If it's not Garcia, it's going to be Palmer. Zalatoris should be up here, right? Yeah, there he is. 35th on the model. Interesting, Kevin Na didn't show up, but either way. What was the last thing I was going to go over? Oh, yeah. Bucket ranks. Harman, your number one guy, and that's probably because he's all ones. Followed by Simpson, Palmer, Henley, wow. Kirk, McIlroy, Corey Connors. A lot of good guys here. Hoffman, surprising to see. Brendan Steele. These are low 6K guys. Look at that. Low 6K golfers. Can you see their price tag? Yes, you can. So yeah, this is where I'm going to leave the video though. If you want that optimizer, obviously, I gave the instructions earlier. Definitely would love, obviously, to provide this. I'm giving the optimizer for the players. I call it in beta. So there are some things on this optimizer that I'm still working through, but the optimizer itself works. And if you wanted to save lineups to import, that function also works. But yeah, there's still a lot of work that I'm doing. So if you have feedback for it, when you do ask for this, if you have feedback for it, please give it, because I'd love to hear it. This is something that I plan on giving to loyal viewers, possibly customers. We'll see if there's a way for me to sell it. But I would be updating it every single week. It would have the dream sheet that you see that I go over every single week, and it would have the optimizer, so you would be able to update it however you want. But yeah, definitely gave instructions on how to get it. I recommend. I'm going to reward you for watching it. I'm not going to tell you how to do it now. I'm just going to reward you for watching it. But yeah, we'll leave it there. Hopefully we win some money this week. Honestly, let's get this thing rolling. Let's find the optimal lineup. I'm intrigued to start building lineups. But yeah, we'll leave it there. Thank you guys for watching. Please leave a like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff, and we'll see you in a review video. Bye.